So, when a global crisis hits, how do governments actually respond? Today, we're going to crack open the global policy playbook from the 2026 energy crisis. And we're using data straight from the International Energy Agency to see the emergency actions that nations all over the world were forced to take. And let's be clear, the scale of this thing was just staggering. The conflict in the Middle East triggered what the IEA themselves called the largest supply disruption in history. This put unbelievable pressure on economies and, more importantly, on everyday people. This wasn't some minor tremor. It was a seismic shock that demanded an immediate global response. All right, so here's our game plan for this briefing. First, we'll get a quick snapshot of the crisis. Then we're going to dive into the two big government strategies. One, managing demand, and two, easing the financial burden. We'll also put a special spotlight on the measures used to support the most vulnerable. And of course, we'll wrap up with the key takeaways for policymakers. As the conflict got worse, the shock to fuel supply chains was, it was immediate and it was severe. This forced governments from literally every continent to jump in and do something, creating this real-time laboratory of emergency energy policy. What we're really looking at here is the anatomy of that intervention. Okay, so the first, most logical place to start was consumption. It just makes sense, right? If you can't magically increase supply overnight, you've got to find a way to decrease demand. This led to this fascinating array of conservation measures, and it really formed the first pillar of the global response. And the toolkit governments used was incredibly diverse. What's so interesting here is just the sheer variety. You had countries in Asia, like Pakistan, mandating remote work, while Sri Lanka limited air conditioner use. In the Middle East, Jordan banned international travel for its public officials. Some countries went even farther, closing schools or implementing direct fuel rationing. This just shows there was no one-size-fits-all solution. It was a global scramble for whatever might work locally. And if you dig a little deeper, all these actions really fell into two camps. On one side, you have the hard mandates. These are the top-down, compulsory measures. Think of Sri Lanka's QR code system for fuel. It's a direct, forceful way to guarantee a reduction. But on the other side, you've got soft nudges, public awareness campaigns like Australia's Every Little Bit Helps. One is about command, the other is about convincing. But look, reducing demand was only half the battle. The other, equally urgent challenge was the absolutely crippling cost of energy for regular citizens and for businesses. And that brings us to the second major pillar of the global playbook, direct financial intervention. And just like before, we see two main schools of thought emerge here. A lot of European nations like Hungary and Poland, they went for price caps, setting a legal maximum for fuel at the pump. The goal there? Universal relief. Everyone benefits. In contrast, you have countries like the Philippines and Greece that favor direct subsidies and vouchers, targeting aid to specific groups. So you see the trade-off, right? Price caps are broad but can distort markets, while subsidies are targeted but way more complex to manage. Now, beyond those two big ideas, the fastest and maybe the most popular tool was just cutting taxes. It was everywhere. From Australia to Germany to South Africa, governments were slashing fuel duties, levies, and VAT. And this really shows you the need for speed in a crisis. A tax cut can happen almost instantly, and it provides immediate, visible relief right at the pump for everyone. It became the go-to first response. But broad measures like tax cuts, they don't help everyone equally. As the crisis got deeper, the focus really sharpened on a critical question. How do you protect the most vulnerable households? We're talking about those for whom a spike in fuel prices isn't just an inconvenience, it's a catastrophe. And this is where policy got incredibly specific. Just look at this. Ireland extended fuel allowances to pensioners and carers. The Philippines gave direct subsidies to transport workers and fishers. People whose entire livelihoods depend on fuel. Korea gave out cash vouchers to low-income groups, and Singapore offered support directly to its taxi drivers. This is the evolution of policy in real time, moving from broad strokes to surgical precision. One of the absolute most effective tools for helping low-income families was leveraging public transit. It became a lifeline. Pakistan made public transport free temporarily. The Philippines offered free bus rides for students and workers. Chile just froze fares completely. These measures gave people immediate relief, making sure they could still get to work, still get to school without feeling the full punch of the price shock. All right, so let's step back from all this data for a second. What are the key strategic lessons we can actually pull from this global response? What does the 2026 playbook really tell us? It really boils down to three key observations. First, every effective response was two-pronged. You had to tackle both demand and cost at the same time. You couldn't just do one. Second, in those first few days and weeks, speed was everything. That's why simple, broad measures like tax cuts and public campaigns got rolled out first because they could. And third, targeting became absolutely critical. The most resilient strategies evolved from just broad relief to providing specific, focused support exactly where it was needed most. So this IEA data gives us this incredible look at the what and the how of the global response. But it leaves us with the most important question of all. We know what actions governments took, but which ones were actually effective? Which policies gave the most relief with the fewest negative consequences? Answering that? Well, that's the critical challenge for preparing for the next inevitable shock.